Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Booz, and on behalf of the American Federation of Teachers, I am excited to introduce and welcome everybody to our keynote today with our new U.S. Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. Before we begin, I want to say a quick thank you to our virtual conference sponsor today, the U.S. Marine Corps. The United States Marine Corps partnership with the AFT's Share My Lesson Conference is a step towards ensuring a message of aspirational service is demonstrated to educators within the context of professional development. The Marines look forward to building enduring relationships within the AFT community and lending support to the teachers and administrators who help young Americans win battles every day. You can learn more about the U.S. Marine Corps by clicking on their logo at the top of your screen. Okay, before we get into this, I'm going to show a really quick housekeeping video on how you can engage with us during this webinar, and then we're going to get into it. Here we go. Hello, my name is Kelly Booz, and I'm the director of the American Federation of Teachers Share My Lesson 1.8 million member community. Welcome to our 2021 Share My Lesson virtual conference, which is our 9th virtual conference. In other words, we've been doing virtual conferences in our pajamas and our yoga pants and our work mullets before it became the hip thing to do over the last year. We have a remarkable lineup of webinars with a focus on reopening schools, anti-bias education, civic engagement, mental health, and trauma-sensitive practices. But before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, we want this to be an engaging webinar. We want you talking to each other, sharing your ideas with each other and with the presenters. So please open up that group chat widget if you haven't already, and tell us where you are joining us from and what you're looking forward to in this webinar. We will be facilitating a question and answer session at the end of this webinar, so be sure to submit your questions in that Q&A widget. We sometimes miss some of your great questions that happen in the chat box, so please be sure to submit your questions in that Q&A widget. This is also the best location to go in case you have any technical issues or need assistance. We will be monitoring the question and answer widget and responding to any issues that you may have. The most common issue is that your screen will freeze or you may have some audio issues. If that happens, please refresh your browser and try to use Chrome or Safari as your browsers of choice. We've added links to the PowerPoint where you can download the PowerPoint and any other related materials. We also have important links to continue on the discussion after this live webinar, or if you're joining us on demand, there is a discussion thread that you'll be able to continue even after this webinar concludes. We know a number of you will want to download a PDF certificate verifying your participation in this webinar. You will be able to do so after you've answered at least 2 poll questions and watched the webinar for a minimum of 35 minutes. If you are a teacher in New York, we are CTLE approved, and we provided information in the confirmation emails on how to access that CTLE credit. Finally, from all of us at the American Federation of Teachers and Share My Lesson, thank you. Whether you're a teacher, support staff, administrator, specialized instructional support personnel, parent, education leader, or you fit into multiple categories, you are heroes and you have endured. We've still got this. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and push our first poll question, and meanwhile, turn this over to our fearless leader at the American Federation of Teachers, the person whose brilliant idea was to come up with the Share My Lesson website, our president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten. Randy, thank you for being here. It's an honor to introduce you, and Secretary Cardona, it's an honor to be with you today.
It's great. So Kelly, thank you very much. It's great to be able to introduce Dr. Cardona to all of our, SML compatriots. And we are up to, I think we've actually exceeded 60,000 people who have registered for this conference this year. We have over 1.7 million. Do we have over 1.8 million, I think, people on SML? Kelly?
We
I
do.
think it's over 1.8 million people.
1,830,000.
We got 1,830,000 people who are on SML. SML has been a lifeline to people during this pandemic. And I'm glad that, as we had our annual conference last year in March, we were knee deep into the beginning of the pandemic. There was a lot of fear and trepidation. And now, a year later, even though we all want COVID over, we're starting to see lots of different hope. And one of those hopeful signs is who I'm about to introduce, Dr. Miguel Cardona. But I just want to say first, I said this yesterday in my keynote, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to everybody who has been teaching, who has been bus driving. Thank you to all the parents who are trying to figure out how we engage in terms of Zoom. Most of us are Zoomed out or Teamed out or Google, whatever the platform is out. And we really want to be back in school safely. Many people are back in school safely right now. And it's really a matter of what we need to do going forward. Teaching and providing education support during this period of time was not easy. And so many of you did so many different things. And I just really, every time I spend any time with educators and support personnel, I really want to just say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for engaging kids through this period of time. Thank you for making people feel safe. Thank you for finding the patience, the creativity, the flexibility to do all of this stuff. And frankly, we didn't have much help during most of it. As you know, we spent a lot of time begging DeVos and Trump to get us the resources, to get us the guidance, to get us the data. And most of the time they said, no, no, no. I noticed today in President Biden's press conference, because there's been a sea change since President Biden has been there. But one of the things he said in his press conference was he was hired to solve problems, not to create division. And that is exactly what we have in the person he appointed and who has now been confirmed as Secretary of Education. So the first thing we saw was that President Biden said, we're going to have guidance from the CDC. And within 2 weeks of his start of his administration, there was guidance, even though there was no real transition period of time. The second thing he said is that help was going to be on the way, and help has been on the way in the form of the $1.9 trillion rescue package that was passed in the middle of March. And the third thing, he and then Dr. Biden, who was a school teacher, and his wife, and Dr. Cardona, there's so many doctors, so little time and so many doctors here. Dr. Cardona, who is also a school teacher, with Dr. Cardona and Dr. Biden and President Biden and Vice President Harris all said was, we're going to have a summit about how to reopen schools. We're going to give people a clearinghouse. We're going to give people information about what to do. And that's exactly what they did yesterday. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Cardona. Secretary Cardona, or Dr. Cardona, Miguel, to our folks who are from Meriden and to our folks who are from Connecticut, he's not just a proud product of public schools. He's made strengthening public education and fighting for equity his life's work. His experience as a public school student, as a public school teacher, as a public school principal, as an assistant superintendent, as a superintendent in Connecticut, and now as the Secretary of Education, he has made his life's work helping children. Now, I happen to know Dr. Cardona from the time that he was in Meriden, Connecticut, because it's one of the locals that we worked with where people showed, and we showed the muscle of what happens when you work together and when you collectively try to solve the problems of education and you try to create opportunity together. And we saw that kind of muscle of collaboration and deep respect for education when he was a principal, not just when he was a teacher, but when he was a principal in Meriden. And this deep respect for educators has traveled with him to Washington. His commitment to collaboration is crucial to providing the resources that we need right now and making those resources work, resources for social and emotional supports, as well as obviously academic recovery. So I can't, I mean, it would be actually be a really low bar to say he's already exceeded everything that, he's already been so much better than Betsy DeVos. Betsy DeVos was the opposite of Miguel Cardona. Here you have somebody who believes in public education, who understands how to do what we need to do in terms of kids, and understands that we work collectively better to actually make sure that every single student, every single person who we have in our charge has the right to thrive. And with him at the helm, I believe we will make huge, huge, huge strides. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Miguel Cardona. Take it away, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you so much, Randy. So happy to be here. Thank you, Kelly, for the work that you're doing with Share My Lesson, and for the intro, Randy. That was really nice. I'm energized. I'm ready. I'm excited about the work we're going to do together for our students and for our educators across the country. Thank you for having me here. First and foremost, I want to echo some of the comments that were made before. Thank you to all of you that are listening, teachers, paraeducators. We know there's so many heroes in our schools, cafeteria workers who fed students all summer and found creative ways to do that. Our bus drivers, our custodians. Yesterday at the summit, we had a facilities director speaking, and, we're all a team. So thank you, all of you, for what you've done this past year. Our jobs changed from one day to the next, and we kept the students at the center, and you did everything you needed to do to get through this, and man, was it tough. But I'm so proud of you. I really mean that when I say that. I'm proud to call myself a teacher. I'm proud of what we've been able to get through this past year. And I know, as Randy said, with the support that we're getting from our president and with the partnerships that we're going to forge, greater days are ahead. Greater days are ahead, that's for sure. Yesterday, I had a Zoom call. It's one thing to thank you, looking at a camera and thank you, but yesterday I had an opportunity to thank 14 teachers that joined me on a Zoom call. And these were teachers that were really special to me. These were my high school teachers, who one of them reached out to me and said, hey, I'm glad to hear you're doing well, and I said, why don't we just have a Zoom call with all the teachers that you can muster up from that year, and, let's come together so I could thank you personally. And it was such a proud moment for me to honor my teachers who inspired me. Some of the teachers on that call, like Miss Ransom, who was my art teacher in high school, who really allowed me to use my art to be my voice for justice. She inspired me to be a teacher, so I was able to thank her. Looking at her face, even though it was a Zoom call, I was able to thank her. So I hope you have those opportunities to thank your teachers, and I hope you're getting the thanks from your students and those families for everything you've done this past year. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the 2021 Share My Lesson virtual conference. I have very fond memories of Share My Lesson here in Meriden. I remember Dave Sharon used to lead that here in Meriden, and there was a major effort to try to get lessons. This was going back over 10 years, I think, many years ago. But I remember that very fondly. And as a matter of fact, when Aaron Benham was president here, that was lifted so much that the Share My Lessons submissions were made. So there are some from Meriden on that website. And actually, those lessons were there to help with another AFT Innovation Grant recipient, the Extended Learning Day schools. We were innovative there, and AFT stood behind that, supported that. And Share My Lesson lessons were created by our teachers to share lessons between one extended day school to another. It was such a wonderful tool. As Randy mentioned, we had a summit yesterday to share best practices, because we know students learn best from students, teachers from teachers, principals from principals, and district and state leaders from district and state leaders. I remember when I was a principal, some of the best professional learning days were the ones where I got out of the way and I just let them focus on their problems of practice and solve them together. So I understand that concept of learning from one another. Share My Lesson really lifts that up. So congratulations at 1.8 million. That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm Miguel Cardona. I'm first and foremost a father of 2 high school students in our public schools here, a 14-year-old freshman, a 16-year-old junior. I'm the husband of a family school liaison, an AFT member, family school liaison whose job it is to work and re-engage families that we've had difficulty engaging with. I myself was a fourth grade teacher. I was part of the AFT, and when I started teaching, and I became a principal, as was mentioned, a district leader here in Meriden, Connecticut. I served as a professor in college, an adjunct professor at the University of Connecticut. I needed to be in the classroom, and I was asked to serve as Commissioner of Education, and then now Secretary of Education. But on a train ride today, I heard students on the train. I heard children on the train, and I love hearing the voice of children. It's always the best part of my day when I'm around students learning. So happy to be with you. I'm honored to be here today. Really quickly, some of the goals that I have, we're gonna boldly and unapologetically address achievement disparities and the causes of those disparities, right? Because we know when children are hungry, they can't learn as well. We know when their teeth hurt, they can't learn as well. We know when they don't have the social emotional support, they can't learn it as well. So we really need to address that. I'm also a very big believer that we need to do more for career and technical education in a way that lifts up those professions and provides better, clearer pathways for students, right? So college and career are both options. I graduated from a technical high school where I was learning automotive for 4 years. I was inspired by an educator to become a teacher, so it's possible, and we can do it in a way that we don't track students. We can do it in a way that gives students an opportunity to join the workforce, return to go to college or get a certification and do very well for him or herself. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about improving access to college and making sure that college is an affordable option for students. Students shouldn't have to give up wanting to own a home because they're going to go to college. So we need to do work there. I'm excited about that work. And another thing that I'm really excited about, and I know you're going to join me with this, is really controlling the narrative about public education and the foundation that it serves for this country's growth. I've always felt when I was a classroom teacher, I had to prove that the profession, or I teach with a chip on my shoulder to say, yes, this profession is the foundation of every other profession. And, as Secretary of Education, I want to make sure that when I lead lifting this profession. You do so much. And oftentimes we're left defending ourselves. No, we need to lead with a good offense about what we're doing for this country and how we're shaping the lives of children and building communities, because that's what we do. I can go on forever about those goals, but I'm going to move it along. Throughout the pandemic, we've been challenged every step of the way. And it's had a significant impact on our children, our families, our schools, our school communities. So my top priority is to safely shift to in-person learning as quickly and as safely as possible. We know that that's the best lever for equity. There is no substitute for in-person learning. I know that from my experience as a Commissioner of Education, but more importantly, in my role as a father. We owe it to our children to safely get them back into classroom, and I know you feel the same way. Oftentimes it's portrayed differently. You feel the same way. We need to safely get them back in. I see schools all the time, and I know that our students want it, our educators want it, and that's our goal. We have to move whatever obstacles there are to do that safely, and the American Rescue Plan really is the president's commitment to saying, I'm with you on that. Man, does it help to have a teacher in the White House. We're going to do it safely. The resources are there. Now the critical thing is to make sure that those resources make their way into the classrooms as soon as possible. Our kids cannot wait any longer. So that's the goal right now, to make sure that those funds go to where they're needed most. Some students were affected much more than others, and we need to make sure that the money gets there as quickly as possible. I'm also thrilled that the president very quickly prioritized vaccinations for our educators. All of you deserve to be vaccinated to ensure that safety. There's also funding to go for surveillance testing, which is critically important. When we're trying to create a culture of safety and trust and rebuild, I always say, we're going to heal together, we're going to learn together, we're going to grow together. We can't skip the healing part. There's a lot of trust and confidence and partnership that has to be rebuilt, and I'm committed to that. So providing vaccinations and prioritizing it for educators and ensuring that there are ways to get COVID-19 tested are ways to do that. As Secretary of Education, I commit that I'm always going to be listening, that I'm going to have a great relationship with Randy and the leaders. It doesn't mean that we're always going to agree. But if we disagree, we're going to disagree professionally and respectfully, because everyone is watching. And we want to model those same behaviors that we want to see across the country in our states and in our locals, that we're going to work together through whatever problems we have. And we're always going to keep the students at the center, but we're always going to honor the perspectives of all educators, teachers, paraeducators, as I mentioned before, our clerical folks, the team that makes up the school community. That's critically important to me. You know, I remember in Meriden, we structured this when Aaron Benham and Mark Benigni, the superintendent, you know, they would meet regularly, and we would be in those meetings as well. And, you know, there were times where when I was rolling out the teacher evaluation plan, or when we were talking about minutes at the elementary schedule, which, you know, every minute is precious. We didn't want to cut out the arts or science. We worked with our teacher leaders to make sure that their voices were heard. At the state level, as commissioner, I felt like I talked to Jan Hockadell, the president of the AFT Connecticut, more than I talked to my kids sometimes, especially during the reopening. But it was critical that we had strong relationships and that we listened to each other, and we respected the differences when we had differences, but we worked together at the end of the day to safely reopen our schools. So that's the commitment that you have from me. I firmly believe in la unión está la fuerza. We're stronger together, and we need to be together in order for our students to reach their potential. You know, there's no playbook in how to deal with a reopening, but I'll tell you, we can learn from one another. We can learn from what works. We can learn from the mistakes that we've made. You know, at the State Department, at the Education Department, we've released the COVID-19 handbook. There's another one that's going to be coming out in April. And that book, the more comprehensive one, has input from educators across the country on what they need information about, right? So that handbook is really going to be response to what we've been hearing. And I'm really pleased that the agency and the folks at the agency, both the career staff and the new folks, they're really working together with a sense of urgency that our president has demonstrated to make sure we provide materials and support for our educators across the country. We also have a Safer School and Campus Best Practice Clearinghouse, where we're going to hear more information about what's working and lift up best practices. We need to lift best practices in this profession so that we're not working in silos. So that's something that's coming. Also, you know, we're going to have a summer learning initiative and a collaborative. And I want to make sure that the AFT fingerprints are all over that, because you know what's best for students. I would not want summer school to look like skill and drill. No, we need to give students experiential learning, opportunities to build robots or go fishing and write about it, do things that are fun and enjoyable. They've been sitting in front of a computer for the last year. We owe them experiences where they can be enriched, not only academically, but in a sense of community. Teachers, you know that better than anyone else, and I know that you can lead this with us. I look forward to a great partnership. I look forward to really making sure that the connection between the agency and AFT is a strong one. And like I said, we may not always agree, but we're going to be respectful. We're going to listen to one another, and together we're going to forge a new path for our students because they deserve it. Thank you, Randy. I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cardona, and thank you so much, Mr. Secretary, Dr. Cardona. We just love the kind of, you know, as you were talking, we were looking at the questions that we're getting in the chat, and I'm looking at the questions that I already had, and you know, you answered about half of them. So, but let me. So I'm not going to ask you the question that I was going to start in terms of what your goals are in this role, because you clearly answered that as part of as part of your presentation, and we're really, really glad for all of those goals and the texture in which you really do understand the muscle in which you have actually done collaboration and understand what it takes to actually move not just policy, but policy and program, and move it at a local level and at a school level. Too often, people in these positions, you know, are too far away from classrooms, and if they were ever in a classroom, don't actually understand and know the kind of stickiness that's needed, the creativity that's needed, the trust that's needed, the collaboration that's needed, the kind of the what ifs that are needed to make things work. So let me just start by saying that summit yesterday was really terrific. I watched all 3 hours of it. And what you were able to do, I think, and you did this with Dr. Walensky in your asking questions of the first few panels. Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond did it later in her questioning, and we actually had the Learning Policy Institute with our state Fed leaders last night talking about, their sense of what we need to do going forward, and their presentations have been really terrific on it. But my question to you is, did you have an aha moment during the summit? And if so, what was it? Like, what was that kind of moment where you say, oh my God, I'm going to write that down, or that was a key to something else that I was thinking?
There were several, Randy, but, the first panel, for example, like the district leader, I think it was Cleveland, and the president, Sherry, I believe, and Eric.
Yes. Yeah.
I kind of felt like, man, if we could just put that in a bottle. They said, I'm a big believer, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? You've heard that. Yeah. If you don't have the culture of respect, collaboration, I don't care how pretty your plan is, I don't care how many pages, how many beautiful pictures you have in it. If you can't have a culture of trust, respect, and collaboration and listening to other perspectives, it won't work. It won't work. So it was no surprise to me that they were sharing some successes. It's no surprise to me that we had the facilities director on that screen, because he played an important role, and all the custodians played an important role in ensuring health and safety. So that was an aha moment. Another one, really quickly. There was a student that said they were no longer just our teachers. They were our friends. They were our counselors. That was powerful. We know that, though. Even before the pandemic, those who are listening on this call, I'm sure so many of these teachers that are listening, so many of these educators, and not just teachers, right? So many different members of the school community, they always keep food in the little cupboards because there's always going to be that kid that's a little hungry. So you've done so much more. And that student spoke for all the students across the country to say, thank you. You're much more than the academics to me. And that stood out to me as well.
Thank you. When as you were talking about both Sherry and Eric, there was a period of time that they, just like so many other leaders, there was real tension because the state, changed the rules on them. And what is so remarkable about that pairing, and I'm so glad you saw it, is that they got over a very tough, tense period of time, and have, because they really have that muscle of collaboration and working together, and they have done exactly what you just said. They're changing the culture. It's not strategy. It's really changing the culture of working together. And so I'm glad that you saw that. We have a lot of questions, Mr. Secretary, on, very specific things about, what to do going forward. And one of those questions obviously is on assessments. And when I did my keynote yesterday, I did say that I had a spoiler alert, and I know you knew that this was coming, which is that, there's a lot of consternation about the administration's waiver policy on standardized testing this year. We see, and we were very grateful for the delinking of, consequences to the tests, and the flexibility that the administration gave to states about the standardized tests. But, at its core, people are asking, why this year didn't we actually just ask, teachers and districts to try to assess what was going on with students this year and use that as opposed to having a set of standardized tests. So I thought I would just put the question right to you and let you answer it.
Sure. Thank you. And, I get, the frustrations. I do. I remember being a classroom teacher, and I remember being a principal feeling similarly. But, I'll go back to something that it kind of drives me around assessments in general. To overuse the data or to misuse the data because it provides pretty charts could be the bane of our profession. Like, sometimes when we're over-reliant on it, we're vulnerable to the issues that come with it. So over-reliance on standardized assessments alone is a major concern that I have. And I'll be very honest with you, I look forward to having conversations about how we can make sure that assessments are providing an opportunity for educators to learn more about their students, but doing so in a way that doesn't narrow curriculum, doing so in a way that's more authentic, where it doesn't look so different from what good pedagogy is, right? I would always struggle when I was a building principal, bubble tests for students who are English learners who are just learning English. They don't have bubble tests any other part of the day, and now we're seeing if they're hitting mastery. So I have my own reservations about how tests could be misused and unfortunately create the wrong narrative. And you're absolutely right. We're very clear. It shouldn't be used to put scarlet letters on schools or on educators, or, we need to be very clear that what it shouldn't be used for. And this is another example, kind of like reopening schools, where in the beginning, last July, all schools were in different places. I had some very small schools. I had some very large schools. So one size fits all doesn't work. And we recognize that flexibility and making sure we met the schools where they were in terms of reopening mattered. Similarly with assessments. But I will say, it's critically important that when we're distributing 130 billion, multiple data points matter. We shouldn't stake everything on standardized assessments, but that's a form of data that might be able to help me as a state commissioner say, this community that has the same demographics as this community is going to get $30 million more because of the needs that came out much greater in this community. So I'm not hanging everything on those assessments, and I don't think anybody should. But I do think it could provide some good data at the policy level and at the resource distribution level, in addition to other data points that are important. So I want to really quickly share, I understand the frustrations. And this may be one of those things where I think across the country, you're never going to get anyone to agree on one way, because there are some that feel very strongly the opposite. But this is one of those things that I know there's an appetite for conversation about this. There has been for years. So I'm interested in engaging you and others to talk about what does quality assessments look like in a manner that we can make sure that we're doing what's right for kids, keeping our student success at the center, and addressing disparities that have exacerbated during this pandemic, but has plagued this country ever since we've been collecting data. Now, it's nuanced. I understand that in 3 minutes, I'm not going to be able to get everything I want to say out there, but I want to close by saying, this is something that I want to keep the conversation going, because to me it matters that our assessments really reflect what our kids need. I don't think teachers need standardized assessments to find out what they're going to do tomorrow, but at the state level, that information can be helpful.
So we're, what I heard you just also say is that we're going to take on, and you're going to take on, and you're going to invite all of us in to actually really think about long-term, what is the proper accountability for, and what are the proper, uses of accountability, and what should be the measurements in terms of things going forward. But I want to make sure that everyone on the Zoom heard these things are not going to be the scarlet letter this year. These things are not supposed to this year. This is supposed to be about data. It's not supposed to count. There's a lot and lots and lots of states that are putting in waiver requests. And I just heard Dr. Cardona, Secretary Cardona, say that this is not supposed to be about accountability this year. We know about the stressors. That's what I heard him say. And I just wanted to, because I saw a lot of questions in the chat as you were speaking, Mr. Secretary, I just wanted to make sure that I got to answer some of them and in the way that I thought you did. And we will take you up on really looking at, the different kinds of ways that we should really be doing assessments. And I think that this year provides some really good opportunities. So let me go to the question that this begged, which is social and emotional supports. The American Rescue Plan has a lot of money devoted for social emotional supports for kids, as well as training and other supports for educators. And there's been a bunch of questions about that in the chat as well. So let me ask you, how what's your thinking about social emotional supports? What you're thinking about it in terms of summer enrichment, what you're thinking about how we do this in the fall and in the next term. I know some of us are very big believers in community schools and using this money to wrap supports around schools. But we would love to see your thinking, or we'd love to hear a little bit about your thinking about how we address the well-being challenges of students who have basically been isolated for a year.
I'm going to add and staff to that.
Yes, thank you.
My response is really one that, I think for far too long, we're putting social emotional supports, mental health supports in a little bucket over here. And then if somebody's acting up or somebody needs help, go over there to get it. So it's similar to equity. Equity is not a thing. It's not a thing we do on Friday afternoon. If social emotional support is not baked into everything that we do after this pandemic, I think we missed an opportunity. So yes, it needs to be interwoven into our extended programs or into our summer programming for this summer. But I think we'd be missing an opportunity if our school design for the fall looks very similar to the school design of last March. Our students have gone through trauma together. Our educators have gone through trauma together. We are coming back. I was thinking about this today. We are collectively, as educators, holding our breath because we've been there for students. We haven't had a moment to think about the impact that this has had to be a teacher when your kids are sitting in the other room struggling to get on their Zoom call. And we're trying to be there for our students who we hope are listening because their screens are out. They might be working to help their parents pay the bills. We haven't even thought about ourselves yet because we've been too busy thinking about our students. So the design, I want to talk about the intentional design of school moving forward needs to have social emotional supports baked in so many different ways. This American Rescue Plan money, we need more school counselors. We need more school social workers. We need more school psychologists. We need more climate folks. And I don't want to call them behavior specialists, climate specialists that are going to lift the climate of our schools. We need more liaisons that are going to connect with families that we struggled to engage over this last year. So the social emotional supports need to be embedded. It needs to be the foundation on which we build academic success. And I really want to frame it that way, because if I don't, it's going to be interpreted that, 30 more minutes of SEL support, or instead of a 15-minute morning meeting, now we're going to go 20 minutes. We're going to add a feeling statement. No, our professional learning for our educators needs to be a part of this. We need to make sure that our systems are designed, our professional learning system, our hiring system, our organizational structures in our district. When I became Commissioner of Education in Connecticut before the pandemic, first thing I did was I said, we're going to have 2 deputies, one for academics and innovation, and one for supports and well-being, because we value the social emotional element of teaching and learning. So I think organizationally, I want to see some structural shifts, and I want to make sure that it's not a thing that we do to students or a thing that we do when people are sad. It needs to be baked into what we're doing as educators throughout.
That's fabulous. And that's something that obviously we want to work with you on. And so many people in the chat have talked about how, they want to get away from this, curriculum of the moment, or the new 5-minute or 20-minute or 30-minute, this is going to change everything in the universe. We know that we have a lot of work that we have to do this coming year because of, the needs of our kids. which kind of leads to, and I'm so glad you said that. I'm going to do two more questions. I'm so glad you said that about, teachers and other educators and the support that educators need. This has been an unsustainable year. It's been a year where educators have done amazing Herculean work. And you see, nobody leaves anything. Everything is on the field this year. And I've seen that over and over again. But it's been pretty unsustainable, particularly practices like online learning simultaneously with in-school learning. And so I think that the issue around teacher retention and, how do we support, how do we nurture educators? How do we make this a profession, not just in terms of recruiting people, but where people actually are treated with the dignity to which they should be treated? And any ideas about that going into this coming year?
I've been an educator for like 23, 24 years. And since the beginning, we've been talking about having to prove ourselves as a profession. That's done. We need to really lift each other up. That's why this partnership is really important. We're on the same team. We need to make sure that we're paying our educators well. It's unfathomable to me to see that educators are working full days with students in front of them, bringing work home, and then having to work another job to make ends meet. The fact that teachers in different states qualify for assistance because the salary is not enough. We really, we need to move past that and really lift the profession for what it is and make sure that we're providing pathways for our educators who are not certified teachers to come into the teaching ranks too. We have paraeducators who've proven year after year that they want to work in those schools, those tough assignments, engaging with our students, and they want to be there. Let's create pathways for them to become certified teachers. Let's make it easier for the folks that work in our schools that want to get into the teaching profession. Let's get them. And guess what? Many of those folks are educators of color that want to become teachers. We just have to create clearer pathways for them. So there's a lot we need to do. But I'll be honest with you, I have the passion for that. But I know that working with you, I'm going to get great ideas. And I know that there are great ideas all over the country already. So what we need to do is lift those best practices and systematize them where we can and provide the supports that are needed and see if this American Rescue Plan can support some of that work to ensure that this profession is getting not only the respect that it deserves, but the pathways to the profession that we so desperately need.
So I know I am getting a text that you have to be pulled within a minute. So I'm not going to ask you our last question, but my last question was going to be, you saw that Betsy DeVos and we were often at odds. In fact, what I said when she left was 2 words: good riddance. But I think that everyone who's watching this sees the difference. We're having this first conversation in front of all of our Share My Lesson marathoners here, is completely different than anything that we ever had with Betsy DeVos. And I know there's lots of other things, but you can see, and I want to just give the secretary the last word. But as I do that, I think the people on the Zoom or on this keynote can actually see that Dr. Cardona really wants to engage with us. And there's lots of other questions. There were questions about student loan debt, which is something that I know the secretary thinks about broadly. For those of you who don't know, the AFT has, been trying to see if we can get a cancellation of $50,000 student loan debt. I know the secretary and the Biden administration is really working on fixing PSLF. I know that people are worried about reopening and other things and ventilation issues and the issues about the disinvestment in buildings. And there's money in both this new bill to fix ventilation systems, but in the next bill that the president is trying to do, there's over $100 billion for how to fix school buildings, retrofit and rebuild school buildings. So there's lots of other things that have come up here. And I know there's lots of people who have already said in the chat, can you come to our school? Can you walk the walk with us? But I just want to give you the last word, Secretary Cardona, and just say thank you so much for spending some time with us and for creating a real sense of hope and mission in this work that we all do in terms of giving kids making a difference in the lives of kids and giving kids the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you, Randy. And, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I started with it and I'll end with it. I'm an educator. I'm the father of 2 students that are in schools, and I'm the husband of an educator. This is, I'm humbled and honored to serve as secretary, and I know what an opportunity we have. But I come from a classroom, and I understand what you're going through. And as I said before, while we may not always agree on everything, we're going to work through things together. We have a wonderful opportunity now after this crisis to really reimagine where we're going in education. And I know in my experience, and my track record shows that we're better and we succeed more when we listen to different voices. We look forward to continued conversations. I want to end by thanking all those educators that are on there, that after a long day, you're sitting in front of your computer watching this. Your commitment shows you're the reason why I feel so much hope. You're the reason why I feel like inspired and excited about rolling up my sleeves and getting to work, because I know you've been doing so much for your students, and it's time that we move this country forward. I look forward to working with you to do it. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thanks so much. And thank you, everyone, for watching this amazing interview, really, with Secretary Cardona. Be safe.